Rain was falling hard on the streets of New York City. It was a cold December evening, and the wind was blowing so strong that it felt like ice cutting through the skin. In a small, broken apartment on the fifth floor of an old building, a young girl named Maya sat near the window. She was only 16 years old, but her eyes looked much older. They carried the weight of pain, struggle, and 1,000 broken dreams. Maya lived with her mother, who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Her father had left them when Maya was only 5 years old. He had promised to come back, but he never did. The only thing he left behind was an old, dusty piano that sat in the corner of their tiny living room. It was broken in many places. Some keys did not work and the wood was cracked. But to Maya, that piano was everything. Every night when her mother came home exhausted and fell asleep, Maya would sit at that old piano. She would press the keys gently, trying not to make too much noise. She had never taken a single piano lesson in her life. There was no money for that, but she had something that money could not buy. She had a gift. She could hear music in her head, and her fingers knew exactly where to go. It was like the piano was speaking to her, and she was simply answering back. Maya's school was not a good place for her. The other kids made fun of her clothes, which were old and worn out. They laughed at her shoes, which had holes in them. They called her names and pushed her in the hallways, but Maya never cried in front of them. She saved her tears for the night when she was alone with her piano. One day, something happened that would change Maya's life forever. Her school announced a talent show. The winner would get a chance to perform at the Grand Music Hall, one of the most famous concert halls in the country. Famous musicians, producers, and even billionaires would be in the audience. Maya's heart started beating fast when she heard this news. This could be her chance. Her only chance to show the world what she could do. There was a problem. A big problem. The most popular girl in school, Victoria, had already announced that she would be playing the piano at the talent show. Victoria's father was Richard, one of the richest men in the city. He owned banks, hotels, and even some of the biggest music companies. Victoria had been taking piano lessons from the best teachers since she was 4 years old. She had a grand piano at home that cost more than Maya's entire apartment building. Everyone expected Victoria to win. No one even thought about competing against her. Maya's best friend, a quiet boy named James, found her sitting alone in the school library one afternoon. He could see that she was thinking about something serious. James was the only person who knew about Maya's love for the piano. He had heard her play once, when he walked past her apartment building, and he had never forgotten it. "You should enter the talent show," James said, sitting down next to her. Maya shook her head. "Are you crazy? Victoria will be there. Her father will make sure she wins. People like me don't get chances like that." "But you're better than her," James said. "I've heard you play. You have something special, Maya, something that can't be taught." Maya looked at him with sad eyes. "Even if I wanted to, how would I practice? My piano at home is broken. Half the keys don't even work anymore, and I can't exactly walk into a music store and ask to use their piano." James thought for a moment, then his face lit up. "What about the old church on Pine Street? They have a piano there. It's old, but it works. The church is empty most of the time. I'm sure the priest would let you practice there." For the first time in a long time, Maya felt a tiny spark of hope in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She could enter the talent show and show everyone what she was capable of. But deep down, she was terrified. What if she failed? What if everyone laughed at her? What if Victoria and her rich father destroyed her before she even had a chance? At night, Maya walked to the old church on Pine Street. It was a small building with broken windows and a leaky roof. But when she pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked inside, she saw it. A beautiful old piano sat at the front of the church, covered in dust. Maya walked towards it slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She sat down on the bench and lifted the cover. The keys were yellowed with age, but when she pressed one, a perfect note filled the empty church. Maya closed her eyes and began to play. The music that came out of that piano was unlike anything the walls of that old church had ever heard. It was sad and beautiful at the same time. It told the story of a girl who had nothing but still dared to dream. It spoke of cold nights and empty stomachs, of tears cried in silence and prayers whispered in the dark. Father Thomas, the old priest who lived in the back of the church, heard the music and came out to see who was playing. When he saw Maya, his eyes filled with tears. He had never heard anything so pure, so full of emotion. He stood there in silence until she finished. "Child," he said softly, "where did you learn to play like that?" Maya opened her eyes and looked at him. "I taught myself," she said. "Music is the only thing that makes me feel alive." Father Thomas nodded slowly. "You can come here anytime you want," he said. "This piano has been waiting for someone like you." From that day on, Maya went to the church every single day after school. She practiced for hours, sometimes forgetting to eat. Her fingers moved across the keys with more and more skill. She was preparing a special piece for the talent show. It was something she had written herself, a song that came straight from her heart. Trouble was coming. Victoria had heard that someone else was planning to play the piano at the talent show. She was furious. No one was supposed to compete against her. She asked around until she found out it was Maya, the poor girl from the broken apartment building. Victoria laughed when she heard this. How could a girl like Maya even think about competing with her? Victoria went straight to her father and told him everything. Richard listened carefully. He was a man who did not like to lose. He had spent millions making sure his daughter was the best at everything. He was not about to let some poor nobody ruin his plans. "Don't worry," he told Victoria with a cold smile. "I'll take care of this." Maya had no idea that a storm was coming her way. She did not know that one of the most powerful men in the city had just made her his enemy. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she had a chance. A real chance to show the world who she was, and she was not going to let anything stop her. The days passed and the talent show grew closer. Maya practiced harder than ever. Her fingers sometimes bled from playing so much, but she did not stop. She could feel something building inside her, something powerful. She was ready. But was she ready for what Richard had planned for her? That was something only time would tell. The morning of the talent show registration was cold and gray. Maya woke up early, her stomach tight with nerves. She had barely slept the night before. She kept thinking about what could go wrong, what people would say, how Victoria would react. But she also thought about her mother, who worked so hard every single day just to survive. Maya wanted to make her proud. She wanted to prove that dreams could come true, even for people like them. Maya got dressed in her best clothes, which were not very good at all. Her sweater had a small hole near the sleeve, and her shoes were still the same ones with holes in them. But she held her head high as she walked into the school building. Today was the day she would sign up for the talent show. Today was the day everything would begin. The registration table was set up in the main hallway. A crowd of students had already gathered around it. Maya pushed through the crowd gently and finally reached the front. The teacher in charge, Mrs., looked up at her. "Name and talent?" Mrs. asked in a bored voice. "Maya Johnson, piano," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. A sudden silence fell over the crowd. Then someone laughed. It was Victoria, standing just a few feet away with her group of friends. She walked forward, her expensive heels clicking on the floor. "Did I hear that right?" Victoria said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Maya Johnson wants to play the piano. This is the girl who lives in that disgusting building near the train tracks. She doesn't even have a real piano. How is she going to compete with me?" The other students started laughing. Maya felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to run away, to hide somewhere dark where no one could see her, but something inside her kept her feet planted on the ground. She would not run, not today. "I'm entering the competition," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. "I have the same right as anyone else." Victoria's smile disappeared. She was not used to people standing up to her. She stepped closer to Maya, her eyes cold and hard. "Listen to me carefully," Victoria whispered so only Maya could hear. "My father owns this city. He owns people. He can destroy your pathetic little life with one phone call. Drop out of this competition or you will regret it." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She knew Victoria was not joking. Richard was a dangerous man. Everyone knew stories about people who had crossed him and lost everything. But Maya also knew something else. She knew that if she gave up now, she would never forgive herself. She would spend the rest of her life wondering what could have been. "I'm not dropping out," Maya said. Victoria stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Maya knew this was not over. It was just the beginning. That evening, Maya went to the church to practice as usual. But when she arrived, she found Father Thomas standing outside with a worried look on his face. "Maya, child, I have bad news," he said sadly. "Some men came here today. They said the church is being closed for repairs. They locked the doors and said no one can come inside until further notice." Maya's heart sank. Repairs, but the church was fine yesterday, nothing was broken. Father Thomas shook his head. "I know, but they had official papers. There was nothing I could do. I'm so sorry, Maya. I know how much this piano meant to you." Maya stood there in shock. This was no coincidence. She knew exactly who was behind this. Richard had made his first move. He was trying to take away the only place where she could practice. For a moment, Maya felt completely hopeless. Without a piano to practice on, how could she possibly compete in the talent show? Her own piano at home was too broken. She could not afford to rent a practice room anywhere. Richard had won before the competition even started. Maya walked home slowly, her head down and her heart heavy. The streets were crowded with people rushing home from work, but she felt completely alone. When she finally reached her apartment, she found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, looking more tired than ever. "Mama, are you okay?" Maya asked, sitting down across from her. Her mother looked up with red, exhausted eyes. "I lost one of my jobs today," she said quietly. "They said they were cutting staff, but the manager told me privately that someone had called and complained about me, someone powerful." Maya felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Richard was not just going after her. He was going after her mother, too. He was trying to destroy their whole family just because Maya had dared to enter a talent show. Tears started falling down Maya's cheeks. "This is all my fault," she cried. "I should never have entered that stupid competition. I should have listened to Victoria. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." Her mother reached across the table and took Maya's hands in hers. "No, baby. Don't you dare apologize. Don't you dare let them break you. People like that, they think they can control the whole world with their money. But there is one thing they can never control. They can never control the human spirit. They can never control a dream." Maya looked at her mother through her tears. This woman had worked so hard her whole life. She had never given up, no matter how difficult things got. And now she was telling Maya to keep fighting. "But Mama, I have nowhere to practice. The church is closed. What am I supposed to do?" Her mother thought for a moment. Then a small smile appeared on her face. "Do you remember Mrs., the old lady who lives in the building next door? She used to be a piano teacher many years ago. She still has an old piano in her apartment. Maybe she will let you practice there." Maya's eyes widened. She had seen Mrs. many times in the neighborhood. She was a kind old woman who always smiled at Maya when she passed by. Could this really work? The next morning, Maya knocked on Mrs.'s door. The old woman opened it slowly, her eyes squinting behind thick glasses. "Hello, who is it?" Mrs. asked. "My name is Maya. I live next door. I was wondering if you could help me with something." Mrs. invited her inside. Her apartment was small but neat, filled with old photographs and memories from long ago. And there, in the corner of the living room, sat a beautiful old piano. It was not as fancy as the one in the church, but it was perfect. Maya explained everything to Mrs. She told her about the talent show, about Victoria and her father, about the church being closed. Mrs. listened quietly, nodding from time to time. When Maya finished, Mrs. was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Play something for me." Maya sat down at the piano and closed her eyes. She began to play the piece she had written herself, the one she was preparing for the talent show. The music filled the small apartment, beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. When Maya finished, she turned to look at Mrs. The old woman had tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I have not heard playing like that in 50 years, Mrs. said softly. "You have a gift, child, a rare and precious gift. You can come here every day to practice. I will not let anyone stop you." Maya felt hope rising in her chest again. Richard had tried to destroy her, but he had not succeeded. She had lost the church, but she had found something new. She had found an ally, a friend, and a place to continue her dream. But Maya knew this was far from over. Richard was not a man who gave up easily. He would come after her again. He would try even harder to break her. The talent show was only 2 weeks away, and Maya had a feeling that the worst was yet to come. Still, as she walked home that evening, she felt stronger than before. She had survived the first attack. She had not given up. And no matter what Richard threw at her next, she would keep fighting. She would keep playing. She would prove to the whole world that a girl from nothing could become something extraordinary. Days were passing quickly and the talent show was getting closer and closer. Maya practiced at Mrs.'s apartment every single day. The old woman would sit in her rocking chair and listen, sometimes falling asleep to the gentle melodies, sometimes wiping tears from her eyes. Mrs. had once been one of the finest piano teachers in the city, but life had taken everything from her. Her husband had died young, and she never had children. Music had been her only companion for decades. Now, watching Maya play brought back memories of brighter days. One afternoon, Mrs. stopped Maya in the middle of her practice. "Your technique is good," she said, "but there is something missing. You play with your fingers, but you must learn to play with your soul. Close your eyes. Think about everything you have suffered. Think about every tear you have cried, every time someone laughed at you, every night you went to bed hungry. Let all that pain come out through the music." Maya did as Mrs. said. She closed her eyes and let herself feel everything she had been holding inside for so many years. The loneliness of growing up without a father, the shame of being poor in a world that money, the anger at being treated like she was worthless. All of it poured out through her fingers and into the piano. When she finished playing, Maya opened her eyes to find Mrs. staring at her with wonder. Now that, the old woman said, was real music. At school, things were getting worse. Victoria had made it her personal mission to make Maya's life miserable. She spread rumors about Maya's family. She told everyone that Maya's father had left because he was ashamed of having such a worthless daughter. She made sure Maya was excluded from every group activity and mocked in every class. James tried his best to protect Maya, but there was only so much he could do. He was just a quiet boy with no power or influence. The teachers did nothing to stop the bullying. They knew who Victoria's father was, and they were afraid of losing their jobs. One day, Maya found something awful in her locker. Someone had broken into it and destroyed all her sheet music. The pages were torn into tiny pieces and scattered everywhere like confetti. On top of the mess was a note that said, "Drop out now, or this is just the beginning." Maya gathered the pieces of her music with trembling hands. Some of these pages had taken her months to write. They contained melodies that came from the deepest part of her heart. Now they were gone, destroyed by someone who had never known what it felt like to create something beautiful. James found her sitting on the floor of the hallway, surrounded by the torn papers. He sat down next to her without saying a word. For a long time, they just sat there together in silence. "They destroyed my music," Maya finally whispered. James nodded. "I know, but they can't destroy what's in your head. You wrote that music, Maya. It came from you. It's still inside you. You don't need those papers." Maya looked at him, her eyes red from crying. He was right. Richard could destroy papers, close churches, take away jobs, but he could not reach inside her mind and erase the music that lived there. That was something no amount of money could touch. That evening, Maya sat at Mrs. Piano and rewrote everything from memory. It took her all night, but she did not stop until every note was back on paper. Mrs. stayed awake with her, making tea and offering words of encouragement. As the sun began to rise, Maya finished the last page. She looked at the new sheets of music spread out before her and felt a strange sense of peace. Richard had tried to break her spirit, but instead, he had made her stronger. Meanwhile, Richard was growing more frustrated. He was not used to being by anyone, especially not by a poor teenage girl. He had made dozens of phone calls, pulled countless strings, and used all his connections. Yet this stubborn girl refused to give up. "She's still practicing somewhere," Richard told his daughter. "I had the church closed, but she found another place. Find out where she's going." Victoria hired some boys from school to follow Maya. They tracked her to Mrs. Building and reported back to Victoria. That same night, Richard made another phone call. The next day, when Maya arrived at Mrs.'s apartment, she found the old woman sitting on the stairs outside her building, crying. A notice had been posted on the building's door. It said that all residents had to leave within 30 days because the building was being sold to a development company. "They're kicking us out," Mrs. sobbed. "I've lived here for 40 years. This is my home. Where am I supposed to go?" Maya felt rage burning inside her. She knew exactly who was behind this. Richard had bought the entire building just to stop her from practicing piano. He was willing to destroy the lives of dozens of innocent people just to win a stupid talent show for his daughter. Maya helped Mrs. back into her apartment and made her some tea. She promised the old woman that everything would be okay, even though she had no idea how to keep that promise. That night Maya could not sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. Richard was a monster. He did not care who he hurt or how many lives he destroyed. He only cared about winning. But then Maya realized something important. Richard's cruelty was actually his weakness. He was so afraid of losing that he was willing to do terrible things. That meant he knew, deep down, that Maya was a real threat. He knew that she had the talent to beat his daughter. If she did not matter, he would not have worked so hard to stop her. This thought gave Maya new strength. If a billionaire was this scared of her, then maybe she really did have something special. Maybe she really could win. The next morning, Maya went to see Father Thomas. The church was still closed, but the priest was living in a small room behind the building. Maya told him everything that had happened, including how Richard had bought Mrs. Building. Father Thomas listened carefully, his old face full of concern. When Maya finished, he said, "There is something you should know. I have been asking around about Richard. He is not just a businessman. He has many secrets, many things he does not want the public to know." Maya leaned forward. "What kind of secrets?" Father Thomas lowered his voice. "Years ago, there was a young musician named David. He was supposed to be the greatest pianist of his generation. But right before his biggest concert, Richard destroyed his career. Some say had him blacklisted from every major venue because David had refused to sell his music publishing rights. David disappeared after that. No one knows what happened to him." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Richard had done this before. He had destroyed other musicians, other dreamers. She was not his first victim, and she probably would not be his last. But Maya also realized that this information could be valuable. If she could find David, if she could learn more about what had done, maybe she could expose him. Maybe she could show the world the truth about the man behind the smiling billionaire mask. Maya thanked Father Thomas and left. She had only 1 week until the talent show. She had to practice, but she also had to find out the truth about Richard. It was a dangerous game she was playing, but she had no choice. That evening, Maya started searching online for any information about David. She spent hours reading old newspaper articles and searching through music forums. Finally, she found something interesting. A video from years ago showing David performing at a small venue. The music was incredible, powerful, and emotional in a way that touched Maya's heart. At the end of the video, there was a comment from someone with a username that caught Maya's attention. The comment said simply, "David is alive. He teaches piano in Queens. Find him if you want to know the truth." Maya's heart started racing. David was alive. He was right here in New York, and he might be the key to stopping Richard once and for all. Maya knew what she had to do. She had to find David before the talent show. She had to learn his story and find a way to use it against the man who had tried so hard to destroy her dreams. The clock was ticking, and the stakes had never been higher. Maya woke up early the next morning with only one thing on her mind. She had to find David. She told her mother she was going to the library to study, which was partly true. She was going to study, but not for school. She was going to learn everything she could about the mysterious pianist who had been destroyed by Richard. The journey to Queens took over an hour by subway. Maya had never been to this part of the city before. The streets were narrow and crowded, filled with small shops and food vendors. Maya walked for what felt like forever, asking people if they knew of a piano teacher named David. Most people shook their heads and walked away. But finally, an old man selling newspapers pointed her toward a small building at the end of a quiet street. Maya stood outside the building for a long time, trying to gather her courage. What if David refused to talk to her? What if he had forgotten everything about Richard and moved on with his life? What if he was angry that someone had come to dig up his painful past? But Maya had come too far to give up now. She climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked on the door marked with the name D. The door opened slowly and a man in his 40s appeared. He had gray hair and tired eyes, but there was something in his face that spoke of a deep, quiet strength. He looked at Maya with surprise. "Can I help you?" he asked. "My name is Maya Johnson," she said. "I'm looking for David, the pianist." The man's face changed instantly. The tiredness disappeared, replaced by a look of caution and suspicion. "I don't do interviews," he said. "I don't talk about the past. Please leave." He started to close the door, but Maya put her hand out to stop it. "Please, mister, I need your help. Richard is trying to destroy me just like he destroyed you." David froze. His eyes went wide, and for a moment he looked like he had seen a ghost. He stared at Maya for a long time, searching her face for something. Then slowly he opened the door wider. "Come in," he said quietly. David's apartment was small and simple. There was barely any furniture, just a couch, a table, and in the corner, a beautiful grand piano covered with a white cloth. Maya could tell the piano had not been played in a very long time. David made some tea and sat down across from Maya. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." Maya told him the whole story. She told him about the talent show, about Victoria and her threats, about the church being closed and Mrs. Building being bought. She told him about her mother losing her job and about the sheet music being destroyed. David listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with every word. When Maya finished, David sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Richard is a monster," David said finally. "I learned that the hard way 20 years ago." Turned to face Maya. "I was going to be famous. Everyone said so. I had a concert scheduled at Carnegie Hall. It was supposed to be my big moment, the start of an international career. But a few weeks before the concert, Richard came to see me. He wanted to buy my publishing rights to own everything I had ever written. He offered me a lot of money, but I refused. I wanted to control my own music, my own destiny." David's voice became bitter. "That was the biggest mistake of my life. Did not take rejection well. He made phone calls. He spread lies about me. He said I was unstable, that I was on drugs, that I was dangerous. The concert was canceled. No venue would book me. No record company would sign me. In a matter of weeks, my entire career was gone." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. "That's terrible. How could he do that?" David smiled sadly. "Money can do many things, Maya. It can open doors, but it can also close them forever. I tried to fight back, but he was too powerful. In the end, I gave up. I stopped playing. I moved here and started teaching children. It's not much, but it's an honest life." Maya looked at the covered piano in the corner. "Do you ever play anymore?" David shook his head. "I haven't touched a piano in 15 years. The music inside me died when destroyed my dream." Maya stood up and walked over to the piano. She pulled the white cloth off slowly, revealing a beautiful instrument covered in a thin layer of dust. She sat down on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. "May I?" she asked. David nodded, his eyes curious. Maya began to play. She played the piece she had written for the talent show, the one that told the story of her life. The music filled the small apartment, beautiful and sad and full of hope at the same time. When she finished, she turned to look at David. He was crying. Tears were streaming down his face and his hands were trembling. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "I have never heard anything like it. You have a gift, Maya, a true gift." "Will you help me?" Maya asked. "Will you help me beat Richard?" David wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, Maya thought he was going to say no, but then something changed in his expression. A fire appeared in his eyes, a spark that had been missing for 2 decades. "I will help you," he said, "but not just for you, for me too, for every musician has ever destroyed. It's time someone stood up to him." For the next few days, Maya visited David every chance she got. He taught her things she had never known about piano, about music theory, about performance. He watched her play and gave her advice on how to improve. More importantly, he gave her confidence. He made her believe that she really could win. But David also gave her something else: information. Over the years, he had collected evidence of Richard's crimes: documents, recordings, testimony from other musicians whose careers had been destroyed. David had always been too scared to use this evidence, afraid of what might do to him. But now, with Maya by his side, he was ready to fight. "The talent show will be broadcast live on television," David explained. "Important people will be watching. If you win, you'll have a platform, you'll have a voice, and then we can expose to the world." Maya understood the plan. It was risky. If she lost, the competition would win and everything would have been for nothing. But if she won, she could change everything. She could bring down a monster and inspire others to stand up against the powerful. Meanwhile, Victoria was getting nervous. She had heard rumors that Maya was practicing with someone new, someone who used to be famous. She told her father, and Richard became furious. "Find out who this person is," he ordered. "Find out everything about them." His investigators worked quickly. Within days, they discovered that Maya had been visiting David. Richard went pale when he heard the name. "David is still alive," he muttered. "I thought I destroyed him years ago." Victoria looked confused. "Who is David?" Richard waved his hand dismissively. "No one important, just a problem from the past, a problem that refuses to die." Richard knew he had to act fast. If David was helping Maya, if they were planning something together, it could mean disaster for him. He had worked too hard to build his reputation. He had too many secrets that needed to stay buried. That night, Richard made a decision. He would not just stop Maya from winning the talent show. He would destroy her completely. He would make sure that no one ever remembered her name. And he would start by silencing David once and for all. The battle was about to reach its final stage, and only one side could win. 3 days before the talent show, Richard made his move. It was early in the morning when David heard a loud knock on his apartment door. He opened it to find 2 men in expensive suits standing in the hallway. Behind them was Richard himself, his face cold and emotionless. David felt his blood turn to ice. He had not seen Richard in 20 years, but the man had barely changed. His hair was grayer, his face was more lined, but his eyes were the same: dark, calculating, and completely without mercy. "Hello, David," Richard said calmly. "It's been a long time." David tried to close the door, but one of the men stuck his foot in the gap. The other man pushed David back into his apartment and closed the door behind them. "What do you want?" David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Richard walked around the small apartment, looking at the simple furniture with disgust. "I heard you've been teaching a young girl named Maya. I'm here to ask you to stop." "And if I refuse?" Richard smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Then I will have to take action. You've been living a quiet life here, David, teaching children, staying out of trouble. It would be a shame if something happened to change that." David's hands clenched into fists. "You already destroyed my career. What more can you take from me?" Richard leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your freedom. I have connections, David. I can make things disappear. I can make things appear. One phone call and the police will find evidence of crimes you never committed. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison." David felt sick. He knew Richard was not bluffing. This was a man who had destroyed countless lives without ever losing a minute of sleep. "You're a monster," David said quietly. Richard shrugged. "I'm a businessman. I protect what's mine. My daughter will win that talent show and nothing will stand in the way. Not you, not that pathetic little girl. No one." Richard turned and walked toward the door. "You have 24 hours to think about my offer. Stop helping Maya and I'll leave you alone. Keep helping her and I promise you will regret it for the rest of your life." The door slammed behind him, and David was left alone in his apartment, trembling with fear and anger. That afternoon, Maya arrived for their usual practice session. She immediately knew something was wrong. David's face was pale and his hands were shaking. "What happened?" she asked. "Are you okay?" David hesitated. He did not want to scare Maya. He did not want to put more weight on her young shoulders, but he also knew she deserved the truth. "Richard came to see me this morning," David said. "He threatened me. He told me to stop helping you or he would destroy my life." Maya felt her heart sink. "David, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to bring you into this. I never wanted to put you in danger." David looked at her with fierce eyes. "Don't apologize. This is not your fault. Has been a bully for decades and it's time someone stood up to him. I'm not going to let him scare me anymore." Maya was amazed by David's courage. This man had already lost everything once because of Richard. He had spent 20 years hiding, running from his past, and now he was willing to fight again, to risk everything, for a girl he had just met. "Thank you," Maya whispered. "I don't know what to say." David smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just win that talent show. That's the best way to defeat him." They practiced harder than ever that day. David pushed Maya to her limits, making her play the same passages over and over again until they were perfect. By the time the sun went down, Maya was exhausted but satisfied. She was ready. The next 2 days were a blur of practice, anxiety, and preparation. Maya barely slept. She kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if she forgot the notes? What if her fingers froze? What if found a way to sabotage the competition? On the night before the talent show, Maya sat alone in her apartment. Her mother had gone to bed early, exhausted from working extra hours to make up for the job she had lost. Maya sat at the old broken piano, pressing the keys that still worked, trying to calm her nerves. Suddenly her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Maya hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A deep voice came through the speaker. "Is this Maya Johnson?" "Yes, who is this?" There was a pause. "My name is Michael Grant. I'm a journalist. I've been investigating Richard for years. I heard you're going to compete against his daughter tomorrow." Maya's heart started beating faster. "How do you know about that?" "I know a lot of things," Michael said. "I know about the church he had closed. I know about the building he bought. I know about your mother losing her job. And I know about David." Maya was silent, waiting for him to continue. "I want to help you," Michael said. "Has gotten away with too much for too long. Tomorrow could be the day we finally expose him. Are you interested?" Maya thought for a moment. This could be exactly what she needed. A journalist with evidence and connections could be a powerful ally. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Michael explained his plan. He had been gathering evidence against Richard for years, documenting all his crimes and abuses of power. He planned to release a major story exposing everything, but he needed a hook, something to grab the public's attention. Maya's performance at the talent show could be that hook. "If you win," Michael said, "the whole world will be watching. I'll release my story right after your performance. People will see a young girl who overcame impossible odds to defeat a billionaire's daughter. It will be the perfect moment to show them who Richard really is." Maya understood. It was a good plan, but it was also risky. If anything went wrong, if she lost, or if found out, everything would fall apart. "I'll do it," Maya said. "For everyone he's ever hurt, for David, for my mother, for everyone." "Good," Michael said. "Remember, Maya, tomorrow is not just a talent show. Tomorrow is a revolution. Get some rest. You're going to need it." Maya hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either she would win and expose Richard to the world, or she would lose and fade into obscurity. There was no middle ground. She walked back to the old piano and sat down. She played a few notes, then stopped. The piano was too broken, too damaged. But somehow, Maya had always managed to make beautiful music come out of it. That was her gift. She could find beauty in broken things. Tomorrow, she would do the same thing on a much bigger stage. She would take all the pain and struggle of her life and transform it into something beautiful. She would show the world what a poor girl from a broken apartment could do. Maya closed the piano lid gently and went to bed. She dreamed of standing on a stage, bathed in bright lights, playing music that made the whole world stop and listen. When she woke up, it was the morning of the talent show. The biggest day of her life had finally arrived. The grand music hall was packed with hundreds of people. Television cameras pointed at the stage from every angle. Journalists, music critics, and wealthy socialites filled the expensive seats in the front rows. The atmosphere was electric with excitement and anticipation. Maya stood backstage, peeking through a gap in the curtain at the enormous crowd. Her hands were sweating, and her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had never seen so many people in one place before. She had never imagined that she would be performing in front of such a crowd. James was there with her, standing by her side like he always did. He had convinced his parents to let him come and support his best friend. Mrs. was also there, sitting in the audience somewhere. Even Father Thomas had managed to get a ticket. David had wanted to come, but it was too dangerous. Richard might recognize him and cause a scene. Instead, David had given Maya a hug that morning and told her to remember everything he had taught her. "You have something Victoria can never have," David had said. "You have a story, you have pain, you have truth. Let the music tell your story and you will touch hearts that have never been touched before." Maya held those words close to her heart as she watched the other performers take the stage one by one. There were singers, dancers, and musicians of all kinds. But everyone knew the real competition was between Victoria and Maya. Everything else was just a warm-up. Victoria was scheduled to perform before Maya. As she walked onto the stage, she looked stunning in her designer dress that probably cost more than Maya's entire apartment. She sat at the grand piano with perfect posture, her fingers hovering over the keys like a professional. Victoria played a complicated piece by, her fingers moving with technical precision. Every note was perfect, every rhythm was exact. The audience applauded politely when she finished. It was an impressive performance, the kind that came from years of expensive lessons and countless hours of practice. But something was missing. Maya noticed it right away. Victoria's playing was perfect, but it had no soul. It was like watching a machine play music. There was no emotion, no story, no heart. It was just notes arranged in the correct order. As Victoria walked off the stage, she passed by Maya. She stopped and leaned close. "Good luck," Victoria whispered with a mocking smile. "You're going to need it." Maya did not respond. She just looked at Victoria with calm, steady eyes. Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment, then she walked away. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Our final performer tonight is Maya Johnson, playing an original composition." Maya walked onto the stage, one step at a time. The lights were blinding and she could barely see the audience through the glare, but she could feel them watching her, thousands of eyes all focused on her. She sat down at the grand piano and looked at the keys. This piano was nothing like the broken instrument in her apartment or the dusty one at Mrs. Place. It was beautiful, perfect, the kind of piano she had only ever dreamed about. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The cold nights in her tiny apartment, the laughter of classmates who mocked her clothes, the father who never came back, the mother who worked until her hands bled just to keep them alive. Then she thought about the people who had helped her, Mrs. who had given her a place to practice, Father Thomas who had let her play in his church, David who had taught her the true meaning of music, James who had believed in her when no one else did. Maya placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes were soft and gentle, like raindrops falling on a windowpane. They spoke of quiet pain, of lonely nights, of tears shed in silence. The audience grew still, captivated by the haunting melody. Then the music began to build. The notes grew stronger, more powerful. They spoke of determination, of the refusal to give up despite impossible odds. They told the story of a girl who had nothing but still dared to dream. Maya lost herself in the music. She forgot about the cameras, the audience, the competition. She forgot about Victoria and her billionaire father. She forgot about everything except the piano beneath her fingers and the melody flowing through her soul. In the front row, Richard sat frozen. He had expected Maya to be average, maybe even good. But he had not expected this. The music was like nothing he had ever heard. It was raw and real and absolutely beautiful. Next to him, Victoria was also starring at the stage. For the first time in her life, she felt genuinely inferior. She had spent years learning to play the piano perfectly, but she had never once made music that sounded like this. The piece reached its climax. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, producing a cascade of notes that filled the entire hall. The music spoke of triumph, of victory, of the human spirit rising above all obstacles. It spoke of hope in the face of despair, of light in the darkness. Then gradually the music began to slow. The final notes were soft and peaceful, like the end of a storm. They spoke of acceptance, of peace, of finally finding a place in the world. Maya played the last note and let it hang in the air. Then there was silence, complete, absolute silence. For one terrible moment, Maya thought she had failed. She thought the audience was sitting in stunned disappointment. She began to feel her heart breaking. Then someone started clapping. It was just one person at first, somewhere in the back. But then another person joined in, and another, and another. Within seconds, the entire hall erupted into thunderous applause. People were standing up from their seats, cheering and crying and shouting. The sound was deafening. It was like a wave of emotion washing over Maya, filling her with warmth and disbelief. Maya opened her eyes and saw something that would stay with her forever. The entire audience was on their feet, giving her a standing ovation. Tears were streaming down the faces of strangers. Even some of the toughest-looking critics were wiping their eyes. In the front row, Richard was not applauding. His face was pale and his jaw was clenched tight. He knew what this meant. He knew that Maya had won and there was nothing he could do about it. Victoria sat next to him, her perfect composure finally cracked. She looked lost, confused, like she had just realized that all her money and expensive lessons could not buy what Maya had naturally. The applause continued for what felt like hours. Maya stood up from the piano bench and bowed, her whole body trembling with emotion. She could see James in the crowd, jumping up and down with joy. She could see Mrs. crying happy tears. She could see Father Thomas, his hands clasped together in prayer. Maya had done it. Against all odds, against one of the most powerful men in the city, against everything that had tried to stop her, she had done it. But the night was far from over. The judges still had to announce the winner, and Michael Grant was waiting with his explosive story about Richard. The revolution Maya had dreamed about was about to begin. The head judge walked onto the stage with an envelope in his hand. The audience fell silent again, waiting with anticipation. Maya stood at the edge of the stage, her heart racing. Victoria stood on the other side, her face still pale from the shock of Maya's performance. The judge opened the envelope and cleared his throat. Ladies and the winner of this year's Grand Music Hall Talent Show is... There was a long pause. Maya felt like time had stopped. Maya Johnson. The crowd erupted once again. People were screaming, cheering, stomping their feet. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she walked to the center of the stage to accept her award. The judge handed her a beautiful crystal trophy and shook her hand warmly. "That was the most incredible performance I have seen in 30 years of judging," the judge said into the microphone. "You have a gift, young lady. Never let anyone take it away from you." Maya held the trophy against her chest, overwhelmed by emotion. She looked out at the audience and saw her mother standing in the back of the hall. She had somehow managed to come, even after working all day. She was crying and smiling at the same time, her face glowing with pride. But the moment was interrupted by a commotion in the front row. Richard had stood up from his seat, his face twisted with rage. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "This competition is rigged. My daughter had the better performance. This is a disgrace." Security guards started moving toward him, but Richard pushed them away. He pointed his finger at Maya. "You think you've won?" he screamed. "You think this changes anything? I will destroy you. I will make sure you never play the piano again. Do you hear me?" The audience was stunned into silence. They had never seen a billionaire behave like this in public. Cameras were rolling, capturing every second of his breakdown. Then something unexpected happened. A voice came from the back of the hall. "That's enough, Richard." Everyone turned to look. Walking down the aisle was a man Maya recognized immediately. It was Michael Grant, the journalist who had called her the night before. Behind him were several other reporters and camera crews. Michael stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and I apologize for the interruption, but there is something the public needs to know. Richard is not just a wealthy businessman. He is a criminal who has spent decades destroying innocent people." Richard's face went white. "What are you talking about? This is slander." Michael held up a thick folder of documents. "I have evidence. Documents, recordings, testimonies. Richard has been bribing officials, blackmailing competitors, and destroying careers for years. He tried to do the same thing to Maya Johnson. He closed down a church just to stop her from practicing. He bought an entire apartment building to evict an elderly woman who was helping her. He had her mother fired from her job. All because he couldn't stand the thought of his daughter losing to someone with real talent." The audience gasped. The cameras zoomed in on Richard's face, capturing every moment of his panic. "That's not true," Richard shouted. "Those are lies. I'll sue you for everything you have." But Michael was not intimidated. "Go ahead and try. Everything I have is backed up by solid evidence. And that's not all. 20 years ago, Richard destroyed the career of a brilliant pianist named David. He used his power and influence to blacklist David from every major venue in the country, simply because David refused to sell him the rights to his music. At that moment, David himself walked onto the stage. He looked stronger and more confident than Maya had ever seen him. The audience recognized him from old photographs and gasped in amazement. "It's true," David said, his voice steady. "Richard took everything from me, my career, my dreams, my future, but he couldn't take my spirit, and he couldn't take Maya's spirit either." Richard looked around desperately, searching for a way out, but there was nowhere to go. The cameras were on him. The evidence was damning. His carefully built reputation was crumbling before his eyes. Victoria stood frozen beside her father, looking confused and horrified. She had never known what her father had done to protect her success. She had believed that she earned everything through her own talent. "Father," Victoria said quietly, "is this true? Did you really do all those things?" Richard did not answer. He could not even look at his daughter. The police arrived minutes later, called by someone in the audience. They took Richard away for questioning, surrounded by flashing cameras and shouting reporters. The billionaire who had terrorized so many people was finally facing justice. In the days that followed, Maya's life changed completely. Her story went viral around the world. She was invited to appear on television shows, magazine covers, and radio programs. Music companies offered her recording contracts. Concert halls invited her to perform. But Maya never forgot where she came from. She used her new platform to speak out against bullying and abuse of power. She started a foundation to help talented young musicians from poor backgrounds get the training and resources they needed. Mrs. Building was saved. After the scandal broke, the developers backed out of the sale, and the residents were allowed to stay. Mrs. continued to live in her apartment, surrounded by happy memories and the sounds of Maya's music. David started playing the piano again. He began performing at small venues, rebuilding the career that had been taken from him so many years ago. He and Maya often played together, their music telling the story of two spirits who refused to be broken. Maya's mother was able to quit her extra jobs. For the first time in years, she could rest and enjoy life. She attended every one of Maya's concerts, always sitting in the front row, always crying happy tears. Victoria's life took a different path. After her father's crimes were exposed, she disappeared from public view for a long time. Eventually, she reached out to Maya through a private message. She apologized for everything she had done and asked for forgiveness. Maya accepted her apology, understanding that Victoria was also a victim of her father's twisted values. Richard was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to years in prison. His empire crumbled, his reputation was destroyed, and his name became a symbol of greed and corruption. All the money in the world could not save him from the consequences of his actions. 1 year after the talent show, Maya stood on the stage of Carnegie Hall, the most famous concert hall in the world. The same stage where David should have performed 20 years ago. The same stage where so many legends had made history. The audience was packed with famous musicians, celebrities, and world leaders. Maya's mother sat in the front row, holding hands with Mrs. David sat nearby, his eyes shining with pride. James was there too, still her best friend, still believing in her more than anyone else. Maya looked out at the audience and smiled. She thought about the broken piano in her old apartment, the dusty instrument in the closed church, the simple upright in Mrs.'s living room. She thought about all the people who had laughed at her, doubted her, tried to destroy her. Then she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The music that filled Carnegie Hall that night was unlike anything the world had ever heard. It told the story of a girl who had nothing, but refused to accept that she was nothing. It spoke of struggles and triumphs, of tears and laughter, of darkness and light. When Maya finished playing, the audience sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then the applause began, louder and more passionate than anything Maya had ever experienced. People were standing, crying, cheering. Maya stood up from the piano and bowed. In that moment, she understood something important. She had not just won a talent show or defeated a billionaire. She had proven something far more powerful. She had proven that dreams can come true. She had proven that talent cannot be bought or destroyed. She had proven that no matter how impossible things seem, a person with courage and heart can always find a way. Maya Johnson, the poor girl from the broken apartment, had made the impossible possible, and the whole world was listening.